The Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
There are 3 victims we know of. The suspect is female, white, late 20s.
Female serial killers kill for power, control.
I believe there's a deeper motivation here.
You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you are going to end up dead.
I've been waiting for you.
Watch the Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+. For bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is supported by FX's The Shards, a seductive drama from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Set in 1980s Los Angeles, the series follows a group of glamorous, deeply entangled high school seniors drawn into a life of wealth, beauty, parties, and excess. At its center is Brett, whose reality begins to unravel when the arrival of a new student coincides with a series of mysterious murders. FX's The Shards premieres August 5th on FX and Hulu.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. As I prep my kids for back to school, I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to share one of my Patreon exclusive episodes with all of you. Today, you're going to hear the story of the Luby's Massacre. I released this episode back in December of 2023, and this is just one of over 60 bonus episodes currently in the Patreon vault. So, if after listening you realize that you're missing out, I invite you to check out Military Murder on Patreon. Right now, anyone who signs up as a free member can listen ad-free to my newest episodes through the end of August. And if you join at the $5 level, you're going to unlock more than 60 bonus episodes, plus a new bonus episode every single month, all completely ad-free. I hope you continue to enjoy listening to this podcast, and thank you, as always, for supporting Military Murder. Now, let's dig in.
Military Murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning: this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is your quarterly mini episode. So, today's mini episode is like a not-so-mini, but I got to thinking about this case when discussing the Kreutzer bonus episode this month. Remember when Kreutzer's friend asked him what the record of mass shooting was at the time and Kreutzer was quick to respond? Well, today, I am bringing you that case. Join me today as I tell you the terrible story of the Luby's Diner Massacre. Just outside of Fort Hood, Texas, is the city of Killeen. As discussed recently, Fort Hood underwent a name change and is now known as Fort Cavazos. But it was Fort Hood when this story took place, so that's what I'll call it today. Our story takes place at the Luby's Diner, which was located on US Highway 190. Luby's was a cafeteria-style restaurant where you order your food at the counter, then you take your food with you back to your table. Well, on October 16th, 1991, it was an extra busy lunch rush. You see, it was Boss's Day, and just coming off of a payday, the diner was packed with roughly 150 patrons. Friends Mike Griffith, a local veterinarian, and Kirby Lack, a local preacher, well, they were eating lunch together when Kirby noticed something weird. He saw a vehicle speeding through the parking lot, and that's when they heard a large crash. The crash occurred at 12:41 p.m., but it wasn't just any crash. It was the sound of a blue 1987 Ford Ranger pickup truck crashing directly into the front plate glass window and ramming right into the Luby's serving counter. That's right, if you can picture this, there was a truck who ran right through the window and was now inside the restaurant. Immediately after the boom, many witnesses assumed the crash was an accident. Maybe the driver suffered from a medical issue, or maybe the brakes failed. As diners scrambled to get out of the way, Mike, the veterinarian, jumped into action, and he immediately ran to the driver's side window to see if he could help the driver. And that was when the driver raised a gun and shot Mike, killing him instantly. The driver was a man named George Hennard, and he had intentionally driven his vehicle into the Luby's Diner. After killing Mike, Hennard then shot a female employee who was standing behind the cash register. Then he started shooting every single person one by one. Witnesses at the scene later reported that Hennard yelled out either, quote, "This is what Belton did to me," or something to the effect of, quote, "This is what Bell County did to me." He also said, quote, "It's payback time. It's payback time. Is it worth it? Is it worth it?" End quote. Initially, the screams and cries of diners were deafening inside the restaurant. But once Hennard started calmly walking through the room picking off people, it fell eerily quiet. Kirby Lack later said, quote, "Everybody quit crying. I think everyone was just trying not to draw attention to themselves," end quote. Kirby was hit in the hip as Hennard started calmly moving through the restaurant. He was armed with a Glock 17 and a Ruger P89. The Glock's magazine held 17 bullets each, and the Rugers held 15 each. Kirby could see Hennard had extra magazines attached to his clothing. Diners and staff quickly scattered and dove for cover as Hennard methodically started shooting people point blank. He was shooting them in the head or in the chest, and he was doing this as he calmly walked around. There was no way to know what he was thinking, but oddly enough, Hennard allowed Anicia McNeil to run away with her daughter, Lakeisha, but not before he shot Anicia's mother, Algika Taylor, who was sitting right next to her. Just before Hennard crashed through the window, restaurant patron Tommy Vaughn, a 28-year-old mechanic, arrived with 8 of his coworkers from a nearby car dealership. On this particular day, Tommy decided to skip the dessert line, and he took his lunch straight to a table in the back. It was outside of Tommy's usual routine because he always got dessert when he went to Luby's, but for some reason, he decided to skip sweets that day. When the shooting started, Tommy's coworker Paul Lombard thought that it sounded like light bulbs falling out of the ceiling, but it didn't take long for the group to realize that Hennard was actually shooting, and they immediately dove for cover under the tables. One of the guys asked Tommy to try to kick out the window so that they could escape from the bloodbath. Tommy was a big dude. He was 6 foot 6 inches tall and weighed a whopping 349 pounds. So Tommy tried kicking at the glass, but all that he did was draw Hennard's attention to their area. A woman sitting right next to him said, "He's coming over." Hennard started shooting towards the area now where Tommy and his coworkers were hiding, and that's when the car dealership's office manager, Pat Atkinson, laid across Tommy as a human shield to try to protect him from the bullets that started impacting all around them. In that moment, Tommy was flooded with a primal fight or flight response. And right then and there, out of sheer desperation, he stood up and threw all 6 feet 6 inches and 349 pounds of himself at the 8-foot window that was near the tables. Tommy's coworkers and dozens of patrons, they followed out of the opening that he created. He would later tell reporters, quote, "I remember thinking, I didn't know that you could bend a window that far. About the time I saw the frame level with my eyes, the windows busted and I ended up outside," end quote. Also eating lunch that day at Luby's was Al and Ursula Gratia with their daughter, 31-year-old Susanna Hupp. Ursula went by Susie. After the shooting started, Al told Susie and Susanna that he had to do something to stop the shooter or everyone was going to die. As Al sat there, he saw an opportunity to disarm Hennard, and he ran towards the man. But Hennard saw him coming and shot him in the chest, dropping Al to the ground. Susanna, the daughter, then saw Hennard turn his back to where her and her mom were trying to hide, and she grabbed her mom by the shirt and told her, come on, we gotta run, we gotta get out of here." Susanna spotted a broken window and she made it out, but when she turned back to see where her mom was, Susie was nowhere in sight. You see, Susie hadn't followed her daughter out the window. Instead, she had gone to her husband Al's side and gathered her gravely injured husband in her arms. Witnesses saw Hennard then approach Susie as she tried to shield Al. She looked up at Hennard, bowed her head, and then Hennard shot her too, leaving the couple crumbled on the floor together. Sadly, Al and Susie had just celebrated their 47th wedding anniversary just a few weeks before this day when they were having lunch with their daughter. Barbara Knight and her friend Kitty Davis had met with 8 other friends for lunch at Luby's. Barbara and Kitty had recently retired from the Fort Hood Dental Clinic, and they got together with their friends a couple times a year. They all got to Luby's on this day right before noon, and at 12:15, the 8 friends had to leave and get back to work. Kitty and Barbara stayed behind to look at pictures of Kitty's new grandson. When Hennard's pickup crashed through the glass, Barbara got up to run, but Kitty said, "He's got a gun, get down." Barbara crawled under a chair. She didn't know how she did it because it was pure chaos in the restaurant. And as Hennard started shooting, Barbara took a round to the foot, and Kitty was shot in the thumb, shredding it completely. Barbara had a fleeting moment wondering how she was going to pay for her food, and then she realized, oh my God, there's no more cashiers left to pay. As they hid, they could hear Al confronting Hennard on the other side of the partition, and then they heard Al being shot. By this point, Barbara had already been shot, but she had not made a sound even when she had been hit in the foot. She was hoping that playing dead would keep her out of Hennard's sights. But as Hennard came around the side of the partition again, he found her friend Kitty, and that's when he shot her in the back at least 2 times. After Hennard turned away, Barbara did what she could to stop Kitty's bleeding with a napkin. Kitty's face by this point was turning gray, but Barbara didn't think she was going to die. And that was when Barbara saw 2 long-haired men come in and confront Hennard. Barbara realized that these were 2 undercover police officers. And eventually, when the shooting finally stopped, one of the officers came over and scooped Barbara up and brought her outside to a waiting stretcher. When Barbara saw them bringing Kitty out, Kitty looked really bad and she was making a groaning noise. Barbara begged the first responders to take Kitty to the hospital first, but they were like, no, we're out of stretchers. Barbara told them, here, she can have mine, just put me on the ground. And they did. Barbara at that point fashioned a tourniquet of sorts out of her stockings to help stop the bleeding in her foot while she waited to be transported to the hospital. But before the shooting stopped, let me go back a little bit. Inside the restaurant, Pat and Sam Carney, a married couple and both employees of the Killeen School District, they were at Luby's for lunch with their friend, another person named Sam. This was Sam Wink, and they were there with 3 other coworkers. Pat was a director of elementary curriculum, and both her husband and their friend were attendance officers with the district. When Hennard's truck crashed through the window, the group was sitting about 12 feet from where it stopped against the dessert bar. Sam Wink thought that the driver had lost control of the truck. When he heard a popping sound coming from the truck, he thought it was going to explode. But then Hennard stepped out of the vehicle, and the popping sound was clear as day, Hennard firing at people in the restaurant. Kirby Lack, who had been there dining with his friend, veterinarian Mike Griffith, the first victim, he was lying wounded on the floor with a bullet in his hip. He could see people escaping from the window that Tommy Vaughn had thrown himself into, and then he saw Hennard, who had circled back around the restaurant and was again pointing his gun at Kirby. In this moment, Kirby played dead even when Hennard straddled him and kicked him in the hip to see if he would move. Kirby, though, stayed super still and didn't make a sound. Right then, Kirby said a silent prayer as Hennard was holding the barrel of his pistol against the back of Kirby's head. Just then, 2 police officers arrived and yelled at Hennard. Kirby said, quote, as they yelled, he was pushing the gun, and I think he looked that direction and it jerked his arm at the same time and he shot. It tore the carpet 1 inch from my little finger, end quote. That day, Kirby would lose 7 friends, but he would keep his life.
The Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
There are 3 victims we know of. The suspect is female, white, late 20s.
Female serial killers kill for power, control.
I believe there's a deeper motivation here.
You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you are gonna end up dead.
I've been waiting for you.
Watch the Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is supported by FX's The Shards, a seductive drama from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Set in 1980s Los Angeles, the series follows a group of glamorous, deeply entangled high school seniors drawn into a life of wealth, beauty, parties, and excess. At its center is Brett, whose reality begins to unravel when the arrival of a new student coincides with a series of mysterious murders. FX's The Shards premieres August 5th on FX and Hulu.
2 undercover Killeen police officers, Ken Olson and Chuck Longwell, they were on their way home after an overnight stakeout when they heard a vague radio report about shots fired. They heard it was coming from Luby's and they gunned it, driving through a red lights to get there. As they arrived, the officers could tell that something was seriously wrong because they could see people sprinting across the road from the restaurant and they could actually smell gunpowder in the air. The undercover officers took cover behind a concrete pillar at the entrance. Olson was armed with his service weapon, a Browning 9mm pistol, and he had several magazines with him. Olson planned on using his civilian clothes to help him blend in so that he could enter the restaurant and take Hennard out. Just then, 2 shots rang out. Olsen thought he had been spotted by Hennard, so he moved up to where he could see inside the restaurant. Officer Olsen could see Hennard now standing over someone, pointing his gun down like he was getting ready to shoot. Olsen took aim and then took the shot, shooting through the busted-out window and across the building. Olsen's shot hit Hennard in the shoulder and lodged in his upper body, but the shot didn't kill Hennard or take him down. Hennard then yelled out that he had hostages, but all Olsen could see were bodies with gunshot wounds to the head. Olsen answered back saying that he didn't have any hostages because they were already dead, and then the undercover cop told Hennard that he was going to kill him. Just then, Olsen and Longwell were joined by Department of Public Safety Trooper Bill Cooper. Cooper asked Olsen what he needed, and Olsen said, "Magazines, we need more ammo." Once Cooper got back with the ammo, they started to move in on Hennard's position. Meanwhile, in a hotel just down the street from Luby's, Al Morris, a detective with the Killeen Police Department, was attending an auto theft workshop. He was coming back from lunch and was walking through the hotel when he heard murmuring about something going on. He went outside and asked, hey, what's going on? And this woman said there was someone at the Luby's shooting everyone inside. Morris immediately ran to retrieve his weapon. He also grabbed his radio and he made a beeline to the Luby's. As he arrived, he could see the crashed vehicle inside the Luby's cafeteria. And as Detective Morris got closer, he could hear fellow officer Ken Olsen inside yelling at the shooter to drop his gun. Hennard refused to comply with these orders. Olsen's partner, Chuck Longwell, was also inside on the radio with dispatch, but in a position where he could not see Hennard. Detective Morris called on the radio to ask what was going on, but mistaking his radio traffic as unrelated to the crisis at hand, the dispatcher basically told Morris to stop talking and mind his business because there was an actual emergency. The dispatcher didn't realize that Detective Morris was at Luby's and ready to assist in the crisis. Detective Morris did not let this stop him. He inched his way around the right of the truck and could see Hennard back by the bathrooms. Hennard was popping in and out of his cover spot while Officer Olsen continued to holler orders to drop the weapon. Hennard then popped off around at the officers, putting a bullet through the windshield of the truck between Detective Morris and Officer Olsen. Detective Morris yelled to Hennard to put the gun down and give up. Hennard's answer was, quote, "No, I'm going to kill more end quote. Detective Morris needed a better angle, so he moved farther around to the right. It was then that Detective Morris saw the grisly aftermath of Hennard's actions. He would later tell KDH News, quote, "I could see dead people laying on the floor. All the blood had almost run out of their faces because they were completely white," end quote. In that moment, Morris crouched down and saw Steve Ernst and his wife, Judy. Judy was holding her mother who had been shot. When Detective Morris reached down and touched the body, Judy asked, "Is she gone?" Morris answered, "I'm afraid so." Detective Morris, a true badass if you ask me, then maneuvered himself around further and could see a bunch of other bodies. He was able to get an angle on Hennard and fired at him, hitting him a couple of times. The detective asked Hennard to give up, but he told him no. Hennard was now backed up into the little alcove by the bathrooms. Detective Morris was out of ammo. Olsen told him he had more ammo in the truck, and Detective Morris ran out and reloaded his magazines. But by the time he got back into position, Hennard had ended the shootout by firing the last round in his gun into his own head. The chaos was finally over, but everyone was still on high alert, and now there were dozens of dead bodies strewn across a restaurant that just minutes earlier was filled with happy customers excited to meet up with their loved ones, people who were celebrating Boss's Day, and people who were just enjoying the day. Now, this day would be remembered as one of the deadliest days the country had ever seen, all at the hands of a veteran. After Hennard took his life, the officers walked back to the alcove and they found Hennard on the floor. Behind the ladies' room door were 2 or 3 women holding the door shut, absolutely terrified for their lives. You see, when Hennard ran back there were women who were already hiding. He tried to force his way in, but the women were able to hold him off. As the police inventoried the area, Detective Morris could see that some of the rounds that they had fired at Henard had hit the wall close to where the women were barricaded, but thankfully, none of them struck the women who were hiding. As ambulance and fire trucks descended on the scene, a helicopter arrived from Fort Hood, landing on the access road across from the restaurant to help evacuate the wounded to local hospitals. The doctors at Fort Hood's Darnell Army Community Hospital recalled the carnage being comparable to that from a war zone. At a local hospital ER, then named Metroplex Hospital, staff had just started hearing from people coming in that there had been a mass casualty in their city. Dr. Charles Mitchell was the ER physician on duty that afternoon. Before EMS could even forewarn the hospital staff, victims began arriving at the hospital. First, a man was dropped off with a gunshot in the ankle. He had been running down a road when a driver passing by picked him up and brought him to the man was able to tell the ER staff what had just happened at Luby's. He warned that there would be many fatalities as he had seen many victims with bullet holes in their heads. When Dr. Mitchell learned how bad things were back at Luby's, he activated the ER's mass casualty response plan and called in about 20 extra medical specialists, including general and orthopedic surgeons. 12 victims would end up at the Metroplex Hospital, with half requiring surgery. Dr. Mitchell told KDH News that some of the victims were treated and released with minimal physical injuries, but many required not just physical treatment, but emotional intervention too. He said, quote, trauma, shock, you get hospital support, chaplain support, you reach out to their spiritual network, and then you get psychiatric support also, end quote. This was an all hands on deck scenario. Reverend John R. Burkmeyer was the priest at St. Joseph Catholic Church and was the Killeen Police Department chaplain. He arrived on the scene about 2 hours after the shooting and began anointing the dead whose bodies were still inside Luby's, which honestly, I didn't even know that was a thing, but I don't know, I kind of like it. In all of the chaos of the shooting, one of the employees, Maria Sema, she ran to the walk-in freezer and closed the door behind her when the shooting started. The thing is, she wasn't discovered until a few hours later after police had cleared the scene, and she was treated for exposure, but thankfully she survived. Another employee, 19-year-old Mark Matthews, who was working on October 16th, he thought that someone dropped dishes when everything started. After he realized somebody was shooting, he ran for the kitchen and tucked his 6-foot frame inside the restaurant's oversized dishwasher. One report said that the dishwasher was 15 feet long, which is really long, I don't know. Mark ended up staying in the dishwasher after Henard was dead and the shooting had stopped. He was scared out of his mind. In this situation, Mark knew and he felt that he would have a better chance of survival if he stayed in the dishwasher. And the thing is that Mark stayed inside the dishwasher the rest of the day and all night until Thursday morning, when finally a Luby's manager found him inside. The manager thought Mark was dead and he called the police officer to check his pulse. But Mark wasn't dead. He had tried to stay awake but dozed off out of pure exhaustion. The police officer was actually someone that Mark recognized from a lecture at his school, and he greeted him saying, quote, Officer Chapin, I'm glad to see you, end quote.
The Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
There are 3 victims we know of. The suspect is female, white, late 20s.
Female serial killers kill for power, control.
I believe there's a deeper motivation here.
You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you are going to end up dead.
I've been waiting for you.
Watch the Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
This episode is supported by FX's The Shards, a seductive drama from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Set in 1980s Los Angeles, the series follows a group of glamorous, deeply entangled high school seniors drawn into a life of wealth, beauty, parties, and excess. At its center is Brett, whose reality begins to unravel when the arrival of a new student coincides with a series of mysterious murders. FX's The Shards premieres August 5th on FX and Hulu.
So you're probably wondering who this George Henard guy was. Well, we don't know much, but this is what we know. In the days leading up to October 16th, 1991, George Henard, who went by JoJo, according to his mom, spent time washing his pickup truck, mowing his lawn, and making obscene gestures at women. He also celebrated his 35th birthday the day before the massacre. Henard lived in Belton, a quiet town about 18 miles east of Killeen. And sadly, he took his reasons for the mass shooting to his grave. On that Wednesday, he claimed the lives of 23 people. But why? This is what we know. After graduating from high school in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Henard joined the Navy, serving for 3 years before being honorably discharged in 1977. After the Navy, Henard joined the Merchant Marines. He did not have a successful career, however, because he was removed from the service after the Coast Guard found drugs in his cabin while at sea. And he also had numerous fights with other men aboard the ships. In addition to this, it appeared to everyone who knew Henard that he really had beef with women. In June of 1991, he mailed a 4-page letter to 2 sisters, 19-year-old Jana Jernigan and 23-year-old Jill Fritz, who were his neighbors in Belton. In this letter, he referred to the sisters as, quote, treacherous female vipers who tried to destroy him and his family. More excerpts from the letter to the sisters said that Henard had found, quote, the best and worst in women in Belton. The rant went on, quote, you and your sister are the one side, then the abundance of evil women that make up the worst on the other side. I would like to personally remind all those vipers that I have civil rights too. I will, no matter what, prevail over the female vipers in those 2 rinky-dink towns in Texas, end quote. Which is really odd, right? I'd like to read the whole letter. But anyway, the sisters mailed the letter to their father, who was a hospital president in Madison, Tennessee. Their dad gave the letter to a staff psychiatrist so that they could analyze it. The psychiatrist later wrote pent-up anger and grandiose sense of power in the margins of this letter. Jana Jernigan worked at a bank in Belton. And 3 weeks before the massacre, on a Friday, when she was handing out popcorn to people who were at the bank, Henard showed up. She told reporters that she handed him some popcorn and he stood there staring at her for a good 15 to 20 seconds with just a big creepy smile on his face. Jana said that he had scary, piercing eyes. According to an article on KWTX 10 News, Henard had filed a complaint with the FBI against America's Caucasian women because they had, according to him, formed a coalition to not date him. What in the world? Seriously, this guy had a chip on his shoulders. And the thing was, I immediately went online to look up a picture of this creep to see if he was like creepy looking or ugly or something. And the thing was that he wasn't. He looked like he could be on the TV show Chip. Remember the cop show where the guys had kind of like wispy hair that flipped at the edges? I mean, that's a typical picture you see of him when you Google him. I'm sure that there were others where he might look different. Anyway, Jill and Jana's mom, Jane Bugg, had suspected that Henard was following Jana because Jane had spotted Henard in different parking lots before Jana and Jill received that creepy letter. Jane said that he would run out to Jill's car, waving his arms at her. Then he started to do it to Jane, the mom, too. Jane told her daughters, this guy is crazy. And then the mom took it a step further, trying to protect her daughters, and she reported this man's erratic behavior to the Belton Police Department, and she asked the chief of detectives specifically to investigate Henard. The police told Jane that they would patrol their neighborhood and that the women should still be careful. In addition to the information about the sisters and the letter, detectives discovered that at the time of the massacre, Henard was unemployed and living in a large 2-story home in Belton that was owned by his divorced parents. His mother, Gina, lived in Henderson, Nevada, and his father, George, was an orthopedic surgeon in Houston. The guns used in the massacre were legally purchased and registered in February and March of that year, while Henard visited his mother in Nevada. And the thing is that Henderson, Nevada, was also where the letter to the sisters was mailed from. And Nevada would be where Henard would get into some trouble. You see, in June of 1991, just a few months before the massacre, Henard was arrested by the National Park Service in the Lake Mead National Recreation Area in Nevada. He was found drunk and driving in the same Ford Ranger he used to crash through the window at Luby's. In addition to the DUI, Henard had also been charged with possession of a loaded firearm for the 2 guns, a Glock 17 and a Ruger P89, the same guns he would later use for his rampage. Henard pled guilty to the DUI and he pled no contest to the firearm possession charge. He was fined $100 for the DUI and $50 for the weapons charge. The guns were not impounded at the time of his arrest because they had not been used to commit a crime. After the shooting, Tommy Vaughn, the brave mechanic who threw himself through a plate glass window and allowed his coworkers and other citizens to escape, Well, he found himself with what he felt was a second chance at life. Tommy walked, or better yet, jumped out of Luby's with just a cut in his arm that required 8 stitches. After everything was said and done, Tommy would later reveal that he felt he was meant to be heavy-set in that moment. Remember, he weighed in at 349 pounds. He said this because it was his height and his weight that allowed him to literally bust through a glass window, not only escaping, but allowing many others to escape the massacre as well. The thing about that particular day was that Tommy never skipped dessert. The reason why he didn't stop at the dessert bar on this particular day, well, Tommy believes it was God's divine plan for him to be able to break out of the window. After the shooting, Tommy did go on to lose a whopping 130 pounds. For him, he says it was a life-changing experience. Thanks to his bravery, roughly 30 to 40 people, including all of his coworkers, escaped unharmed. But like most survivors, Tommy downplayed his actions, and he told Reporting Texas that, quote, "I was not the hero. I was trying to save myself," end quote. Barbara Knight recalled having surgery on her foot to repair the damage from the bullet that tore through it. The next night, a beautician brought her kit over to the hospital and gave Barbara a manicure to clean the blood out from under her fingernails. I don't know about you, but this is one of the most touching things that I've read. Myrtle wrote in the script that this act of kindness and humanity really touched Barbara. That in all of the chaos, someone that she didn't even know would use their skill to help others escape the nightmare that they had just survived. Barbara's friend Kitty Davis, who she gave her stretcher to, she initially survived, but sadly, she ended up dying 3 days after the shooting and became Hennard's 23rd and final victim. A grand jury convened following the shooting, and it was found that the 3 police officers who engaged in the firefight with Hennard were justified in using deadly force. It was also determined that none of the bullets that the officers fired hit any civilians. Killeen Police Chief F.L. Giancomazzi said, quote, "Had the response not been that quick, I'm sure you would have seen higher fatalities at Luby's because of the rounds directed at the officers," end quote. Basically, what this meant was that had Hennard not engaged police with his bullets, those bullets would have been aimed at more civilians, including the women who were in the restroom. An autopsy was performed on Hennard, and it was determined that he did not have any drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of the shooting. As for the investigation at Luby's, forensics determined that Hennard fired about 80 rounds during the 15-minute rampage. Police fired 30 shots. 4 hit their target. Hennard's father suspected his son was possibly suffering from a brain tumor, which he said could explain his actions. But the autopsy negated that, noting, quote, "Other than the self-inflicted gunshot wound, the rest of the brain showed no abnormalities," end quote. Susanna Hupp turned her grief into action and ran for the Texas legislature in 1997. She won and served for 10 years. But even before her time as a state representative, Susanna pushed for gun rights. You see, during the shooting when her parents and 21 other people lost their lives, Susanna actually had a handgun, but it was 100 yards away in her car. You see, in 1991, Texas gun laws did not permit someone to carry a handgun on their person, and Susanna respected the law. Susanna's experience was instrumental in then Governor George W. Bush passing a concealed carry law in 1995. Victim Patricia Brand Kemp Carney was a teacher in Killeen for more than 27 years when she lost her life at Luby's. In October of 2020, 29 years after the rampage, Killeen School Board voted to name a new elementary school in her honor. Detective Morris, well, he was a Vietnam veteran. He recalled the shooting and how it affected him afterwards. He had been a crew chief mechanic and door gunner on a Huey helicopter from 67 to 68 and had been shot down 5 times. He also had a round go through his shirt but had never physically been wounded. After the Luby shooting, he told KDH News, quote, "I was there for a year and a lot of that flashed back. The first month after Luby's, I had a constant VCR, aka video cassette recorder, in my head, and all I could see were bodies laying on the floor," end quote. Luby's corporate leadership jumped into action immediately following the shooting, and they started a $100,000 fund called Operation Care for the Luby's victims and their families. they also kept 44 employees from the Killeen restaurant on their payroll, paying out $8,000 a week for the hourly workers alone. The initial thought was to close down the restaurant permanently, tear down the building, just get rid of it and forget it ever happened. But the survivors and people of Killeen, they were determined to not let Hennard have that type of control over their lives. With that, the restaurant was renovated and reopened 4 months after the shootings. It remained open until 2020 when it was finally shut down. The location would ultimately reopen and serve as a Chinese restaurant.
The Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
There are 3 victims we know of. The suspect is female, white, late 20s.
Female serial killers kill for power, control.
I believe there's a deeper motivation here.
You have no idea who you're dealing with, and you are gonna end up dead.
I've been waiting for you.
Watch the Hulu original series, Furious, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Mrs. Zona Lynn had driven 45 miles from her home in Marlin, Texas, to have lunch with 3 other friends prior to attending a planning meeting for an upcoming Baptist convention. One of the friends she was dining with was Mrs. Claudine Humphrey, who was going to be the convention's master of ceremonies. Both women lost their lives that day. Zona Lynn was a retired teacher, mother of 2, and grandmother of 2. She was known to be an excellent cook and even wrote a column for the local paper about herself and her broccoli casserole. Claudine Humphrey was a nurse's assistant at the Marlin VA Medical Center. And the crazy thing is that despite the close location to Fort Hood, only 1 military member was killed that day, 43-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Stephen C. Doty. His funeral at Fort Hood was attended by about 350 friends, relatives, and colleagues. Red, white, and blue carnations were placed in the front of the sanctuary near his coffin. Lieutenant Colonel Doty was awarded medals for flying recon missions for the Army in Vietnam after he enlisted in '69. He was recognized for his leadership in 1990 after coordinating airlift to move 27,000 troops from Fort Hood to the Persian Gulf in support of the Gulf War. He supervised their return in early 1991. In his spare time, Lieutenant Colonel Doty liked to tinker with car engines, and he liked to jet ski with friends and family at Lake Stillhouse in Belton. He and his family had lived in Texas for 8 years at the time of his death. And are you ready for this? Colonel Doty was just 2 weeks from retirement when he died. Ugh, that really got me. I hate this. In 14 minutes, George Hennard left 23 people dead, 27 injured, and thanks to the fast action of the police, he left 125 survivors. But I am sure the survivors have many invisible wounds. There is a pink granite memorial located outside of the Killeen Community Center at 2201 East Veterans Memorial Boulevard in Killeen that is etched with the names of the 23 victims. The victims' names are Patricia Pat Carney, 57, of Belton, Jimmy Carruthers, 48, of Austin, Crimhild Kitty Davis, 62, of Killeen, Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Doty, 43, of Fort Hood, Al Gratia, 71, of Coppers Cove, Ursula Gratia, 67, of Coppers Cove, Deborah Gray, 33, of Coppers Cove, Dr. Michael Griffith, 48, of Coppers Cove, Venice Hennihan, 70, of Metz, Missouri, Claudine Humphrey, 63, of Marlin, Texas, Sylvia King, 30, of Killeen, Zona Lynn, 45, of Marlin, Connie Peterson, 43, of Austin, Ruth Pajol, 36, of Coppers Cove, Suzanne Rashot, 30, of San Antonio, John Romero Jr., 33, of Coppers Cove, Thomas Simmons, 55, of Killeen, Glenn Arvil Spivey, 44, of Harker Heights, Nancy Stansberry, 44, of Harker Heights, Olga Taylor, 45, of Waco, James Welsh, 75, of Waco, Lula Welsh, 64, of Waco, Juanita Williams, 64, of Temple. I know. I sometimes wonder why I still make this show because it is super depressing. And yeah, anyway, all I want to say is thank you so much, True Crime Army, for joining me at this level on Patreon. Your support means the absolute world to me. Shout out to Myrtle for researching and writing this episode and keeping me on my toes. My sources for this episode include articles in Reporting Texas, the Dallas Morning News, KLTV, the Washington Post, KDH News, UPI, ABC 13, The Morning Call, the Caryville Times, The Province, Texas Monthly, Orlando Sentinel, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, KWTX, and the Temple Daily Telegram. Military Murder was created by Mama Margot Productions. This episode was produced by all of you, my boot camp and retirement level patrons. The music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another Military Murder Mini next time.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Athletic Brewing Company crafts award-winning non-alcoholic beers for those who want to be part of every round. With over 185 flavor awards, they're exceptional NA beers that fit your lifestyle and any social occasion. Summer's full of good times, and Athletic fits right in. Go to athleticbrewing.com to have brews delivered to your door, or find them at a bar, restaurant, or store near you. Near beer. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times.